our guide and teacher for 3 generations, and inspiration for quality teaching and research, to come and kindly take chair along with Mr. Shri K. Chaturvedi as guest of honor, Mr. Yogesh Singh. May I request our dean and a great friend of all of us, and scholar and administrator and pilot of this seminar, Mr. Ranjit Singh ji, to kindly take chair next to Mr. Yogesh Singh ji. May I request our chairperson, a very noble soul who does her own benign support to all good things in the center, Mr. Tiplu Nongwari, to kindly come take chair along with Mr. Ranjit Singh. And now is the time to call upon the key person, the captain of the team, which is engaged for the last 5 years, understanding different dimensions of poverty at IITA, Chronic Poverty Research Center, India Director, and a professor of economics, and of course, above all, a student of our university, long time back, Mr. Balla, Mr. Sheila Balla, and others, Ms. Asha Kapoor Mehta, to kindly take chair. Ms. Asha Kapoor Mehta. Now I call upon Master of Ceremony, the coordinator of this program, who has been organizing it for the last 2 months, Ms. Saheli Sinha, a research scholar of Center for the Studies of the System, who is the Master of Ceremony of this session, to kindly come and start the program. Mrs. Saheli Sinha. Microphone is not working.
Good morning to everybody. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome all the guests, our delegates, and the participants to the inaugural session of International Conference Eradicating Chronic Poverty in India, Policy Issues and Challenges. Now, without wasting much time, I will straight away go on to the program. We start off with the presentation of the Gamusa to all our honorable guests. I would call upon our students to please come in one by one and present the Gamusas to our respected guests. Professor T. N. Chaturvedi. After the presentation of the Gamusas, we have the release of the souvenir of the conference souvenir. I would request the convener of the souvenir committee to please come up on stage.
Singh, Asha Mehta, Namuri, and Dr. Anand Kumar. I will equally welcome you to all coming up on eradicating from our policy issues and challenges. This is a right for me that I am welcoming you here and the distinguished scholars on this side of that is particularly relevant in an Indian context because the word, the way they have defined it in the terms of known poverty, is not that acquired poverty, it is a task. And this is also an interesting aspect that number of sociologists and economists are working together on this. Because in Indian aspect, social hierarchy contributes considerably to poverty, where for generations there are certain groups which are not allowed to own property and not allowed to get out of their poverty. So these issues linked to economic conditions, not that other groups do not have poor, but some of the groups they remain poor in their generation continue to suffer from poverty. So on this occasion, I welcome you all once again to this important seminar.
Policies and issues in a systematic manner. This seminar is to create an interface between policymakers, academicians, and social movements about the challenge of poverty. We are going to have 8 sub-themes in next 3 days, and the final will be lessons from the other countries, and ultimately the valedictory panel discussion about lessons for the future. Because if the universities are not looking at the challenge of poverty, then the universities are writing their own death rate. A country like India is in no more luxury of ignoring poverty or letting it be handled by either the state alone or the market alone or by the poor alone. We are very happy that for last 5 years, every year, Chronic Poverty Research Program has been creating these interfaces, and this has been taking place at Indian Institute of Public Administration. We are very thankful to the CPRC group, led by Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta and ably supported by Professor Shashank Bhide of National Council of Applied Economic Research, Professor Amita Shah of Gujarat Institute of Development Studies, to engage JNU as the next site of this responsibility. We are extremely thankful to all those who responded to our very innocuous call for papers through Economic and Political Weekly, and the senior scholars and the policymakers and the activists of the country will be very happy to know that poverty is not in the zone of benign neglect so far as the scholars of India are concerned, because we received more than 200 abstracts within a short period of 6 weeks, and we are very happy that we have been able to shortlist a group of 120 scholars from different parts of India, right from Jammu and Kashmir to Kerala, and they are here with their abstracts, which is there in the souvenir, and they are here with thought-through presentations, which will be organized through a variety of technical sessions. We are also having a number of social movements represented, and we have a particular session which is about
people's movement against poverty in India. And then there is a session about challenge of poverty and the approaches of Indian political parties. And I'm very happy to say that two of the union ministers, representative of the major opposition alliances, the NDA and the Left Front, and a number of regional parties which are battling or which are engaged in the challenge of poverty in the so-called Bimaru states, have also nominated their members of parliament to come and have that interface in the coming days. Now, this seminar is about a problem. This seminar is about a challenge. This seminar is about a duty. It is a duty of all the academicians worth their salt to look at the poor and read in their eyes what they expect from us, the people who are so privileged because of the support from the society, to be scholars, to be policy makers, and to be destiny makers. I think in the last 5 years, CPRC has published a series of monographs. Some of the authors are very much here. They'll be there for the next 3 days. We are also very happy that one of us, who has been on his own engaged, invited the challenge of poverty and is now respected for his scholarship about poverty challenges, kindly agreed to come and give an inaugural note. We are extremely thankful to Professor Abhijit Sen for sparing the time. We are very happy that Professor Yogen Singh, who has been one of those who comes from one of the most poorest parts of India and has been sociologist of optimism, sociologist of hope, has agreed to come and share his thoughts. It is going to be presided by somebody who has seen India grow out of a country which had 75% people below poverty line when he became a young IS officer, and he has been one of the leaders of the new processes as Governor of Karnataka, as member of Rajya Sabha, and today he is continuing to pilot the national duty of looking at the most severe crisis of our country, that is poverty, Shri T. N. Chaturvedi. We are hoping that this session will be also enlightened by the efforts being done by the present system, because Professor Raghuvansh Prasad Singh, who had an engagement because of the flood crisis in Bihar and has agreed to join us in spite of all the challenges, because he also thinks that this is no time to be engaged in playing game. We have to learn from each other and move together. So he is also going to be there in this session. I am sure that this session will make a great start for all of us to feel inspired and to feel involved in this problem as academicians, as concerned citizens, as activists, and of course as the destiny makers of future India. Now may I call upon Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta to kindly tell us about Chronic Poverty Research Center, the idea, the program, and the impact it has created so far, before we go for the inaugural note by Professor Abhijit Sen. Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta.
Thank you, Anand. What is CPRC India? It's basically a small project at IITA that is special in that it is multi-institutional and it's multidisciplinary. The core team, as Professor Anand Kumar just told you, is just for academics who've tried to work on many different facets of persisting poverty and poverty dynamics. He's mentioned the names, I won't re-mention them. Giving us strength is a large network of senior scholars such as Professor Sheila Bhalla, Professor M. S. Swaminathan, Professor N.C.B. Nag, Professor Thorat, and many, many others, who've taken the time and trouble to write papers on what we identified as very serious gaps in the body of knowledge pertaining to persistence of poverty. A major source of encouragement for us has been the older generation of researchers, some of whom have taught us, people like Professor T.S. Bhalla, Professor Chadda, Professor K.L. Krishna, Professor Vyas, who've encouraged us with comments and reviews of our work. Now what we hope is that there's going to be a third tier, and that's the younger generation of researchers who are presenting papers at this seminar and who we hope will take forward work on these issues so that they do take center stage and that they don't fall by on the wayside. What has made our work possible was the tremendous support that we received from the IITA management, In particular, our chairman, Mr. T. N. Chaturvedi, Mr. Janeja, Mr. Mathur, and Dr. Reddy, who is the former director of IIPA, because their recognition of the relevance and the importance of this issue and their support for our work made it possible for us to focus on this research and take these issues forward at various seminars at IIPA, which fed into and led us to then bring out several working papers. We've got 34 already published, 12 in process of being published, another several papers that are currently being written by the lot of us. None of this would have been possible without this kind of support. We've also managed to get papers published in the World Development, in the Journal of Human Development, in the Alternate Economic Survey, and the Indian Journal of Labour Economics, and the opportunity to feed our work into government. Again, what's also made this possible is our links with a large global network of academics at the University of Manchester, at ODI, at Bangladesh, Uganda, South Africa, Kenya, and several other countries that have provided immense two-way learning and dissemination of work. We started our work with trying to understand the issues emerging from the large poverty literature and the data in India. That's work done by Abhijit Singh and by many others, and we realized that poverty was the single largest development issue that was facing us, that the numbers were large and the incidence was high. When we started our work, persistence of poverty was hardly recognized. There was one paper written by Raghav Bhaiya, which was not, which was there in the literature for people to read, but chronicity was not mentioned, and when we said we wanted to work on chronic poverty, it was chronic what? Why the concern with chronic poverty? Because poverty isn't just a question of X% of people being below the poverty line. The lived reality of 301.7 million persons in poverty is that roughly half of them are stuck in poverty, which means their children are going to inherit that poverty, which means that they are also multidimensionally deprived, and it means that many of them are in extreme poverty and suffer hunger. And this with extremely low levels at which the poverty line is set, which is 356 rupees in rural and 538 rupees per capita per month in urban areas. Roughly the amount that it costs me to fill my car with half a tank of petrol. And when you consider that this poverty line does not include provision of several basic necessities such as health, access to health, to everybody by right, then you begin to understand what it means to be poor, what it means if you fall ill and you're poor, what it means if you're struck with a disaster and you're poor. We tried to answer a number of questions such as who are the chronically poor, what socioeconomic groups are more vulnerable to chronic poverty, and found that casual agricultural laborers were the largest group. Therefore, much of the change in household income of the chronically poor depended on changes in wages. How significant is chronic poverty in India? And we found that Gide's work at the NCAR on using their panel data set showed us that about half the households that were poor were stuck in poverty. And roughly 25% of those who were not poor entered poverty between 1970 and 1981. Subsequently, that work was extended by Gide, Hari and others, and they added the severity dimension to that work and used that data set to analyze the impact of growth on poverty and found that other factors needed to be in place before growth would have a poverty-reducing impact. Where are the chronically poor spatially located? Are the chronically poor located in or concentrated in remote rural areas? The answers to these questions came from Amita's work on remote rural areas, especially with Shakti Padi and XLRI in Orissa, and her work with Saha in MP. To identify the spatial location of the chronically poor, we did some work at IIPA using indicators of multidimensional deprivation in 379 districts of India, and found that 52 of the most multidimensionally deprived districts were located in UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, and Bihar. None of this is really a surprise. It's just that we managed to put a lot of that work at one place and provide the evidence needed to push it forward. And today that chronic what and chronic who can be seen in various places in the 11th plan, and also in various working group reports that are on the Planning Commission website. We needed to understand the political sociology of poverty, and Anand Kumar filled that gap. As expected, we found that among the most important determinants of poverty are caste and tribe. And also realized that since one of the most critical groups within those who suffer chronic poverty are casual agricultural laborers, we then Professor Sheila Bhalla used NSS data to provide in-depth analysis and evidence of rural casual laborers being the largest single group that suffer chronic poverty, and pointed out that superior rural infrastructure accounted for regional differences in poverty among rural casual laborers, and promoted the shift from low productivity casual labor in agriculture to more productive casual labor in non-farm sectors. That this was the key, that superior infrastructure was the key to higher wages and one of the keys to improvements in literacy and school attendance. That real wage rates were higher for casual non-farm workers and poverty ratios were lower. Since caste and tribe were among the most vulnerable, as were older persons, Irudhya Rajan worked on older persons, and Professor Thorat and Moti Malik explained why poverty is higher among STs and SCs, and pointed out that 3/4 of the SCs continue to be landless and near landless, and so improvement in access to agricultural land and the level at which the wage rate was set and the access to non-agricultural employment continued to be extremely important. What Irudhya Rajan drew our attention to was the fact that even among those who are older than 80 years of age, 22% of males and 17% of females continue to work, which could ostensibly be, in some cases, due to extreme poverty. Anand Kumar studied the usefulness of the old age pension policy in Eastern Uttar Pradesh. We looked at the scheme for the rural old age destitute and the areas in which improvements could be brought about in it. What is the impact of shocks caused by globalization, by conflict, by health-related problems, by development-related displacement, and agricultural fluctuations in generating chronic poverty? We tried to understand shocks through Anand Kumar's work on conflict and on beavers in eastern UP, and our work at IITA on farmer suicides, and on health, in particular on the impact of HIV/AIDS on causing entry into poverty. Not because HIV/AIDS is not only because it's a concern in itself, but because any illness can cause serious exacerbation of suffering for those who are ill and are poor. Terrorism has now hit many of our cities, and the Red Corridor cuts across a large number of districts. Anand Kumar's work on Bihar and Manipur tried to understand the linkages between conflict and poverty and how each of them feeds on the other. The Manipur work focused on forced migration of ethnic groups from hill areas to the capital town and the consequential loss of livelihood. The Bihar work draws a grim picture with regard to the reach of poverty alleviation programs in Musehari block in the state. Causing concern is the remarkable absence of any inclusive approach regarding the poverty question by the socio-political leadership and movements in Bihar. I've already said that the strong links between poverty and ill health need to be recognized and need to be acted on. The onset of a long and extensive illness can drive the non-poor into poverty and create immense stress even for those who are financially secure. High healthcare costs can lead to entry into or exacerbation of poverty. The importance then of public provisioning of quality healthcare to enable access to affordable and reliable health services cannot be overestimated in the context of preventing the non-poor from entering into poverty or in terms of reducing the suffering of those who are already below the poverty line. Strengthening of public health centers and access to free, reliable, quality, comprehensive medical care is critical, as is full preventive, promotive and curative care that needs to be available at these levels and in peripheral hospitals. As also 24-hour functional diagnostic testing facilities, adequate beds and doctors and functional equipment maintained and available for 24 hours each day, with effective drugs through revised and schedules and not old medication that doesn't work anymore. Amita's work on land and natural resources is based on the fact that landless households constitute a major proportion of chronic poverty, that agricultural productivity rather than ownership of land per se is significant in influencing poverty among rural households, that water is a critical important factor but is necessary though not sufficient for poverty reduction, that outmigration and access to non-farm employment are other important factors, that forest-based regions are maintainers of high incidence of poverty, and that resource degradation appears to be both a cause as well as a result of chronic poverty in the region. The two policy imperatives that she identifies are recognizing tribals' land rights as well as stakes in management of forests and exploring avenues for resource transfer as a means of compensation for management and conservation of forest resources. The challenge for us is to shift towards water efficient and knowledge employment intensive systems of agricultural production. We've also recently done some work on social protection and on work on demand. We've looked at the NREGA and compared the MEGS, the Maharashtra Employment Guarantee Scheme in which the NREGS is rooted, and compared that with the NREGS and pointed out that the guarantee, that while the MEGS provides round-the-year guarantee except for the peak agricultural season to all adults willing to do unskilled manual work, provided they are above 18 years of age. The NREGA provides the guarantee only at the level of the household not the individual, and additionally limits the entitlement to just 100 days. That rural works and asset creation under the scheme need to be dovetailed to the major natural resources based programs such as watershed management, forest development, wasteland development, Bharat Nirman, irrigation, provision of drinking water, etc. And that verdicts regarding the success or failure of the NREGS are premature, and instead what's urgently needed is sharing information on how to make the NREGS more effective. If this is not just to be another wage employment program and the purpose is to create much needed rural assets, then it's important that the NREGS allocations be used to create the quality assets that are going to be sustainable. The work, our work goes on. We hope you will join hands with us and take this work forward, not just in terms of writing papers, because just writing papers doesn't do it, not just in terms of publications, because that too isn't going to do it, but we want to take this forward in terms of actually ensuring that there is implementation of what is stated in vision documents and that is stated by the Prime Minister, the President, the Finance Minister, the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, and everybody you hear at any at any of these particular fora. We want to make sure that these words don't remain words, that these words become action, so that we can actually make a difference to the lives of the 301.7 million people who are ostensibly in poverty in any case, but the many more who are also above it and yet who are suffering significant deprivation, because even the 500 and some rupees and the 300 some rupees don't really do it for any of us. Thank you very much.
Professor Abhijit Sen for the inaugural address.
Shri Chaturvedi, Vijendra Singh ji, Anand Kumar Asha, and everyone else. I'm honored to be here at this meeting on chronic poverty. I've been an observer of the chronic poverty group for a very long time. I've never quite been a participant in what they have done. And what impresses me most about this group, and I suppose the very detailed deliberations we'll have over the next 3 days, the most impressive part of it is that it is multidisciplinary. It is multidisciplinary and asks questions which some of us who are essentially economists, when we look at poverty, the sort of questions we ask, we get very limited. I have about 20 or 25 minutes to address you as an opening session, therefore I'm not going to go into details of anything. I'm going to take up broadly 3 themes. Theme number 1, which is an issue which comes up whenever poverty is discussed, is how many poor there are, is poverty declining, how much does it cost to reduce poverty. I'm guilty of having dealt with some of these earlier, and I think in a conference such as this, one need not waste too much time into these issues. But nonetheless, let me actually put 2 points before you, because these big questions never go away, and unfortunately they do tend to take more time and more discussion than they merit. The 2 issues are the following. On this first one, we have now over time debated, discussed whether poverty is declining, whether it's not declining, what is the rate of decline. One thing which has been pretty much, I think, conceded and agreed is that the rate of decline of poverty has not been commensurate in any way with the increase in the growth rate of GDP. In other words, we have done better in increasing the average levels of income of people, but we have done so in a way which has not that significantly reduced the number of poor people. The second point, which is I think becoming clear, is that the definition of poverty that we have used in this country may be unduly stringent. Asha just gave you the numbers. As she said, about half a tank of fuel, what it costs to buy, that's the poverty line for a whole month. And I think two very recent works, one by the World Bank and the other by the ADB, have now come up with poverty numbers for India, which are, one is about 42-43%, the other is between 50 and 60%. And these numbers are hugely more than our official poverty numbers of 28%. And one of the reasons why this happens is in part, of course, about technicalities regarding international comparisons, which I shall not go into, but also because it turns out that our poverty line is in fact somewhat lower than the poverty line of the 15 poorest countries in the world. In other words, we have actually set ourselves too low a poverty line. But nonetheless, as I said, these are not issues that I want to go into, because I think if one remembers that maybe our performance over time has not been very good, I think that's settled now. Second, that a lot of people would agree that what we say is poverty is in fact a very conservative number. I think the issue then becomes, what do we do about it? How do we go about it? And let me now turn to my second theme, which is the way economists look at poverty, and the way I think this way of looking at it is an extremely poor way of looking at it. Now take a situation which I think roughly most of you would say follows from what I've just said, which is that incomes are growing, but we are not being able to reduce poverty. Now one approach to this, and a very typical economist approach to this, would be that here's a problem. Our growth process may not be able to reduce poverty. Do we deal then with the growth process, or can we do something else? Now, one of the things we could do is that the growth process creates, that is, the growth process creates income. If this income is going to the relatively rich can afford to pay taxes, we collect the taxes, and we redistribute this to simply to the poor. In other words, there is a view increasingly which says that part of the poverty reduction need not have anything to do with the process of growth. It could simply be accomplished by tax and redistribution. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that in some part, the 11th plan is precisely that. The growth, the higher growth rate that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years has thrown up much higher rates of tax revenues, some of which can be plowed back, and very largely the definition or the concept of inclusive growth has involved putting large parts of this back into areas which could actually do something about the sense of exclusion of which poverty is one. But by and large, this way of looking at it is to essentially say we can solve the problem by transfers of one kind or the other. And a lot of what is discussed, and I'm sure will be discussed in the days to come, in the 2 days to come, is how to go about doing it best. And here I would like to put to you something which you might actually think about in your deliberations. One of the things which has grown along with liberalization of economies, of a liberal view of the way economies ought to function, is the simple idea that government should not do too much about how the economy is run. In other words, let the economy grow with the market. If that is the case, then unless the forces in the market themselves create the condition for reduction of poverty, that will not happen. It might happen to some extent, it might not happen to an extent you want. At that point, the argument kicks in, but if the economy grows fast enough, the cake will get bigger, you can take part of the cake and transfer that to the poor. And the extreme part, the extreme way of looking at the poverty problem then becomes, let us go for an set of economic policies which maximizes growth, then let us get back a certain amount of income from that growth so that you take a part of the cake and redistribute it to the poor, and this is where I think the real argument, the real recent argument comes in, is to the extent possible do this through conditional cash transfers rather than by developing state intervention in particular areas. Now, conditional cash transfers is therefore a part of saying, let the cake grow on its own, and let us not intervene in ways which might actually have something to do with the rate of growth of the cake itself. So simply just give money to people. This is something we in India have by and large not done. This is something, on the other hand, which increasingly is being suggested for a large number of countries, and this suggestion is coming for India as well. And I think the arguments against this are far stronger if you bring non-economic issues. The non-economic issues which both Asha and Anand mentioned, issues such as the link between social problems and social exclusion, which we in India have more than almost anywhere else. Issues such as the link between poverty and conflict, and issues such as extreme exclusion from property, which is to some extent related to the caste issue. And I think it would be useful for this conference to actually come out very clearly on, can we actually view the poverty problem as simply a matter of let growth go on, let us simply identify who are the poor and then simply take money somehow and deliver it to them? Or does it have to have something to do with education, health, the ability to bear risks of all kinds? Risk may be those which come from health matters, risk which comes from weather, risk which comes from conflict, or risk which might in fact come from globalization. I mean, we don't quite know what is going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months given the meltdown which is going on. And I think it's important to actually ask this question, because I think this is something which an economist feels that there is a way of thinking which leads you to one way of things, and we are obviously missing out on a number of other things. And this finally brings me to what I want to say a little bit more, which is, what have we done in India? Why have we not done as well as we could have? The matter of poverty is something which we have been talking about. I mean, there's nothing new about it. I mean, it's something which I think Indians have been talking about poverty always. In our plan specifically, we've been talking about poverty from the very first plan. By the fourth plan, we had a whole poverty module. By the sixth plan, we had a whole department of rural development, which is now there, which actually said that the biggest department in the government of India should be the rural development department. But clearly, we have somewhere along the line not done as well as I think collectively we all agree that we could have done. And I think we all agree why that hasn't happened. Finally, I think it comes down to that single sentence कि जी प्लान तो बहुत अच्छा होते हैं मगर implementation बहुत खराब है. But again, that I think really begs the question. And I think it is precisely a group such as yours which can, I think, concretize this question in the following manner. I have just said, please discuss the economist's idea of simply making cash transfers and the government not delivering any services, neither education nor health, let the private sector deliver. That's one extreme. The other extreme is when services are being delivered, when there is a service delivery going on, do we actually try to deliver the services in boxes meant for different groups? Let me give you a simple idea. For reasons which are fundamental to the nature of our society, we have focused on, for example, the scheduled tribes and the scheduled castes. We have in plan after plan talked about special plans for the scheduled castes and the special plans for the scheduled tribes. We have exhorted states to put a proportion of their plan expenditures to do that. We have done that less successfully with the central government. But by and large, I think everybody agrees that this has simply not happened. We then, and correctly I think, have had reservations not just of plan expenditure but of jobs. We have had reservations of various kinds. I personally think that is necessary, but it clearly is something which divides. We have, in many ways, put forward one of the world's supposedly most comprehensive food security systems. Our food security system tries to pay a minimum support price to the farmer, tries to have a very comprehensive delivery system which can deliver anywhere in India, and it tries to actually then target the poor so that the poor get very targeted food. On top of that, we have an ICDS which tries to get at the mother and child, and we supplement that with a scheme for pensions for the very old. And yet, I think a lot of people, more economists than others, continuously exhort us that close down the FCI, give up the PDS, and we'll do better. The question again, I think, really is, where should we be focusing? Have we over-designed some of our things? Because one way of thinking about over-design is that we've got a FCI, we've got a PDS, we've got the Anganwadis all over the country, and in the 11th plan on almost all of these we have rediscussed, and there are views which go from one extreme to another on all of these. I don't think this is a place in a conference to actually talk about the systems design. I think it is a place to talk about where some of these systems issues should be discussed. And I think, let me close by actually putting, I think, the main dilemma that some of us feel. And the dilemma is the following. In many ways, the thrust that we have taken, at least over the last 15 or 20 years, is that service delivery is best done if it is done through levels of government which are close to the people. Which is why with the Panchayati Raj institutions, a lot of our money now is supposed to go through the PRI institutions. Roughly 100,000 crores are in programs where the PRIs are supposed to play a major role. The PRIs themselves have very little capacity. We have not invested enough in the capacity of the PRIs to do things that we expect them to do. On the other hand, the way we have designed a number of our programs will not happen unless sensible, strong decisions are made at the PRI level and they have the capacity to deliver on what is expected. In many cases, not only have we not given them the capacity in terms of, let alone engineering, which is necessary for many cases, but also of accounting, which is necessary for accounts to be maintained. But we have also tied many of the things by guidelines which leave very little discretion at that end, except the discretion simply to choose the beneficiary. And then you get a Bandarban which has become. Now clearly there are other objections to PRI institutions. For example, it is very easy if one is asked which states in India do best. And you can of course get states like Kerala in one extreme, but you also get a state like Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu's health system is probably better than most other states. But it gives hardly any place to any PRI organization at all. It's simply that it is much more centrally driven, probably better administered. And a lot of people say that, there is a tension that even after amending the constitution, we do not actually we have not yet actually decided as a country where the responsibilities are going to lie. And this, of course, is reflected in the way our politics works. But I think critical to this discussion is, please, whenever you are actually talking about chronic poverty, and chronic poverty is not about large numbers, it's people who can never get out of poverty, please reflect on where decisions need to be taken and how that implementation has to be decentralized, because it will have to be decentralized. Nothing can be done from the state alone. Thank you.
Where the decisions have to be taken and who are going to be responsible for implementing the decisions. With these two very critical questions about chronic poverty victims, Mr. Sen makes genuinely inauguration of a debate or inauguration of a dialogue. Now the present moment has come to welcome another guest of honor, Dr. Raghuvansh Prasad Singh, a man who moved with the masses and started with the villages and bazaars of Bimaru, India, and today he is one of the key pilots of key actors of anti-poverty crusade of the country. Whenever you see Raghuvansh Babu in parliament or on television, you feel that he is engaged with a missionary zeal to realize those dreams which inspired him to move from academia. He was a lecturer of political science to mass mobilization and now governance. We are very happy to welcome Raghuvansh Babu, and let me request the volunteers to first आपको गमुसा आसाम का आया हुआ दिया जाए और सम्मेलन का जो साहित्य है, आज का स्मारिका और विशेष रिपोर्ट वो आपको दिया जाए। और अब हम रघुवंश बाबू से आग्रह करेंगे, सीधे ये बिहार के बाढ़ राहत काम से यहाँ पहुँचे हैं और ये बहुत अच्छा हुआ कि आपको प्रोफेसर अभिजीत सेन की कुछ बातों को सुनने का भी मौका मिला। और अब इस सम्मेलन के विशेष संबोधन के रूप में प्रोफेसर रघुवंश प्रसाद सिंह।
प्रोफेसर आनंद कुमार जी को हम धन्यवाद देते हैं कि उन्होंने क्रॉनिक पॉवर्टी, गरीबी समाप्त करने के लिए बहस जवाहरलाल विश्वविद्यालय में बहस की शुरुआत उन्होंने कराई है। पहले से भी बहसें होती रही है, बाकी क्या कुछ हुआ संक्षेप में और हम अभी तुरंत जानेंगे, समझेंगे, सीखेंगे। लेकिन इसलिए भी मैं धन्यवाद देता हूं कि एक से एक विद्वान जनों को इन्होंने बुलाने का, इसमें भागीदार बनाने का देश विदेश में प्रोफेसर टी.एन. चतुर्वेदी साहब, पुराने जाने माने जानकार विद्वान प्रोफेसर अभिजीत सेन, अर्थशास्त्री महान योजनाएं थे, और प्रोफेसर योगेंद्र सिंह जी समाजशास्त्री, महान समाजशास्त्री, ज्ञानी, वैज्ञानिक, ध्यानी, समाज सेवी, समाजशास्त्री, सभी लोगों को इन्होंने बुलाने का काम किया। देश विदेश में अभी जानकारी मिली, विदेश से भी कुछ जानकार विद्वान, बहुत उत्कृष्ट समाज से भी सभी तरह के लोगों का इन्होंने जुटान किया है। इसलिए हम धन्यवाद देते, प्रशंसा करते। गांव में जो गरीब बसते उनके मन में कैसा कौतूहल और उत्साह जगेगा कि जवाहरलाल विश्वविद्यालय में गरीबी हटाने की और हमारे विषय में चर्चा हो रही है और उसमें एक से एक जाने माने विद्वान भाग ले रहे हैं, और उनका यह विश्वास होगा कि नहीं नहीं, अब तक का जो कष्ट हुआ से हुआ, अब गरीबी रहेगी नहीं, क्योंकि जहां दुनिया का मशहूर विश्वविद्यालय में देश विदेश के मशहूर विद्वान लोग जुटे, अब बहस करें, चर्चा करें, तो कोई कारण नहीं है कि हिंदुस्तान में गरीबी अब टिक पाएगी। ऐसा विश्वास उनको होगा। क्रॉनिक पॉवर्टी के हटाने का आपने विषय रखा। अभी तक पॉवर्टी हटाने का सुनते थे, क्रॉनिक पॉवर्टी। अब मैं याद करता हूं साहित्यकार, पुराने भक्त कवि थे विद्यापति, उनकी दो पंक्ति से आप समझ सकते क्रॉनिक पॉवर्टी। हिंदुस्तान में संस्कृतियों का और संस्कृति कैसी है, गरीबों के देवता भोलानाथ शंकर भगवान माने जाते हैं, निश्चल देवता। क्या कहते हैं विद्यापति जी? कखन हरब दुख मोर हे भोलानाथ, कखन हरब दुख मोर। दुख ही जन्म भेल दुख ही जियाओल, सुख सपनहु नहीं भेल हे भोलानाथ, कखन हरब दुख। गरीबों की वाणी, उनकी स्थिति, उनकी खराब हालत इस पंक्ति में वर्णन होता है। भोलानाथ जैसे देवता से वो मांग कर पूछ रहे हैं, सवाल उठा रहे हैं कि हमारी गरीबी कब हटेगी, दुख कब खत्म होगा। दुख ही जन्म भेल दुख ही जिया बोला, सुख सपनहु नहीं भेल। अब अभी हाल के कवि गोपाल सिंह नेपाली की पंक्ति 4 गो सुन, सारे वर्णन और सारा इतिहास और सारा अर्थशास्त्र और सारी पीड़ाएं। दिन गए बरस गए, गोपाल सिंह नेपाली, दिन गए बरस गए, यातना गई नहीं, रोटियां गरीब की प्रार्थना बनी गई। श्याम की बंसी बजी, राम का धनुष चढ़ा, बुद्ध का भी ज्ञान बढ़ा, निर्धनता गई। एक से एक हिंदुस्तान में महान पुरुष आते गए और जाते रहे, लेकिन गरीबी बनी हुई है। धनुर्धर राम आए, बंसी वाले कृष्ण भी आए, ज्ञान वाले भगवान बुद्ध, उनका भी ज्ञान और दिव्य ज्ञान हुआ, लेकिन गरीबी उसी तरह से बनी, निर्धनता नहीं गई, निर्धनता बनी। ये अभी के इतिहास में वर्णन करता है पीड़ा कि हिंदुस्तान के 6 लाख गांव में और दुनिया में जहां पॉवर्टी है, क्यों है, और क्रॉनिक पॉवर्टी है, पहले से गरीबी है, क्यों है और ये कैसे समाप्त हो। विभिन्न मंत्र और विभिन्न अभ्यास गांव में भी और सभी जगहों में हुआ। गांव में अभी दिवाली होगी, अभी आएगी दिवाली, गांव भर के लोग जुट करके लक्ष्मी आवे दरिद्रा भागे, लक्ष्मी आवे दरिद्रा भागे। सुबह में दिवाली के भोर में, मैं नहीं जानता हूं देश भर के हर कोने में होता हो, लेकिन किसी न किसी रूप में होता है। दिवाली के भोर में गांव की महिलाएं, दादी नानी महिला, बूढ़ी महिलाएं सूप और डगरा पीट पीट करके लक्ष्मी अंदर दरिद्रा बाहर, गरीबी भागे, संपन्नता आवे, इस तरह का मंत्र उच्चारण कर रही है गांव में आम आदमी। फिर देश भर के लोगों की भी चिंता है, गरीबी है, गरीबी है, हटेगी कैसे, हटाया जाए, कुछ हटी है कि रुकी हुई है, थमी हुई है गरीबी। तो इसीलिए विद्वान लोगों के हम कायल हैं, इतना ना उसमें खड़ा। गरीब कौन है, अब इसका हिसाब का कैलोरी जोड़ाने लगेगा। 2200 कैलोरी की, 2400 कैलोरी की, 4000 कैलोरी की, 12000 हिसाब जोड़ाएगा। गरीबी कौन है, गरीबी हटाने में सबसे प्रथम उत्पात क्या होगा, ये गड़बड़ी हो। गरीबी हटाने में ये सब रुकावटें। अब कैलोरी लकड़ा वाला कमेटी, अब कौन कितनी ही कमेटियां, अभिजीत सेन साहेब का योजना आयोग है, हर योजना आयोग का कार्यकाल में एक से एक गरीबी की परिभाषा करी। हम लोग का साधारण गांव को जो देखते हैं, अब उससे अब विद्वान लोग इसका अर्थ लगा दें। रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान, पढ़ाई, दवाई, 5 वो बुनियादी चीजें हैं। 5 में किन्हीं के पास 4 है, 1 नहीं, किन्हीं के पास 3 है, 2 नहीं, किन्हीं के पास 1 है, 4 नहीं, और किन्हीं के पास 5 नहीं। अब कौन गरीबी के कहाँ पर रखेंगे ये लोग जाने, लेकिन हम लोग पूछते सबसे प्राथमिक आवश्यकता रोटी, रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान, पढ़ाई, दवा।